The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us for the July installment of ILA's Leadership Perspectives webinar series. I am Ellen Van Velser, Senior Fellow at the Center for Creative Leadership and a member of the ILA Board. And I will be moderating this webinar with C.B. Bhattacharya, Dean of International Relations and Professor in Corporate Responsibility at the European School of Management and Technology in Berlin, Germany. Before we start, please note the following. First, this webinar will be archived. If you missed something, if you'd like to hear the webinar again, or would like to see the presentation again, they will be published to the ILA website within 24 hours. You will receive an email with instructions for accessing the archived recording after the webinar has ended. Second, we welcome your questions throughout the webinar. At any time, you may ask questions by typing them into the question box of your webinar control panel, which is currently displayed on the right-hand side of your screen. We will address your questions during the second half of the webinar. Please note, however, that we may not be able to address each question we receive. So without further ado, I would like to tell you a little something about our speaker. Professor Bhattacharya is an international expert in business strategy innovation aimed at increasing both business and social value. His research and teaching focuses specifically on how companies can use under-leveraged intangible assets such as corporate identity and reputation, membership and brand communities, and corporate social responsibility to strengthen stakeholder relationships. Professor Bhattacharya has published over 60 articles in leading journals. He's co-author of the book, Leveraging Corporate Responsibility, the Stakeholder Route to Maximizing Business and Social Value, and co-editor of the book, Global Challenges in Responsible Business. His talk today is entitled, Leveraging Corporate Responsibility, the Stakeholder Route to Maximizing Business and Social Value. So at this point, CB, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ellen. And it's a great pleasure for me to do this webinar for the ILA. And a warm welcome to all of you who are listening in. Sorry that we are not able to see face-to-face, but then I guess the slides are more interesting than I am, so you have the better part of the deal. So the talk is titled Leveraging Corporate Responsibility, the Stakeholder Route to Maximizing Business and Social Value, which is the same essentially as the title of my just published book. And what I wanted to do today is give you a sense of kind of what the contents of this book are and the research kind of behind the book. But before I get there, I want to start telling you how I in fact got to this topic in the first place. I did my PhD way back when, almost 20 years ago, from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, and my PhD was in marketing. And at that point, corporate responsibility was not a phrase that was bandied about that much. And I was working more with mathematical modeling of supermarket scanner data and trying to figure out measures of brand loyalty and customer retention and so on and so forth. But when I was a young assistant professor at Emory University, I met a gentleman by the name of Ben Cohen, who was the CEO of Ben & Jerry's at the time. And likely all of you know that Ben & Jerry's makes ice cream, and it's this company that was founded by the hippies in Vermont. And you might also know that Ben & Jerry's does some really interesting things for society and the environment, like they support the fair trade movement, they pay their workers a living wage, and they support community and organic farming, lots of good stuff. So I met Ben Cohen, and I asked him, we got to talking, and I said, hey, Ben, is there anything that intrigues you in the field of research that maybe I can help you with? And he said, there is one question that intrigues me. And he said, we do a lot of stuff for society. and we do a lot of stuff for the environment. He said, can you help me understand whether that helps us sell more ice cream or not? So when people come to buy ice cream and they're deciding which brand to buy, would they rather buy Ben & Jerry's rather than Haagen-Dazs, because of our social and environmental performance? So I thought that was a rather interesting question. I had never thought of anything like this before, and I thought that was rather interesting because what he was asking for was a marketing outcome, which is sales, and I was, doing research on drivers of sales for a while at that point in time, like all the marketing scholars. And at the same time, he had identified an antecedent, which was corporate social responsibility, which was nowhere on the horizon in terms of the drivers or antecedents of sales that we were thinking about. So I got to thinking, I said, well, this might be an interesting way of expanding the marketing literature and expanding the marketing field to thinking about kind of, whether what companies do in the social and environmental arena, whether that can actually improve their kind of business performance as well or not. And as academics, we take time to think about problems. So I've been thinking about this problem and affiliated problems for the last 15 years or so, and have put together a body of work, much of which is published in academic journals, and now of late this book has come that kind of bridges the academia and practice. So the question, so obviously the world has changed today, and everybody is doing something in the corporate responsibility arena, right? And everybody has a social initiatives, and everybody has environmental initiatives. All large companies have websites touting what they do in the corporate responsibility realm. But if you think about the question in simple terms, and if you look at these two axes that I have up there, doing good, which is creating social value, and creating environmental value, and if you are doing well, basically, which is the financial performance of the firm, or the business returns to the firm, if you will, what Ben Cohen was really asking me about was whether it's possible to exist in this upper right-hand quadrant or not. And this is what my research really tries to address. So if you look at the various spaces in this 2x2 chart, clearly no one wants to be in the bottom left because you're not doing much of anything. So let's not talk about that. The upper left quadrant is actually quite interesting, and this is a quadrant that we in the literature refer to as the tragedy of the commons, whereby companies have taken away resources from the environment, they've taken away resources from society, and have boosted their financial performance at the same time. And this is exactly what has happened to to our society over the last 50 years or so, which has seen tremendous wealth generation by companies at the cost, at a dear cost to society and the environment. But now, essentially, because of stakeholder pressures, increasing consciousness about the environment and society, there is a tremendous interest in moving over to the right-hand side of this chart. Now, if you think of the lower right, I mean, this is a perfectly good space to exist in, and I call this corporate responsibility, or CR. I'll refer to this abbreviation going on. This is fine. I mean, this is where companies basically do good for the sake of doing good, for the normative case, essentially. So you do not think of what it brings you in return. You just kind of build a bridge or build a hospital or do something good for your community. And if it does, if it brings you some return, well and fine. Otherwise, if it takes away from your financial performance, that's also fine, and it does qualify as corporate responsibility. But if we only kind of talk about this, then we would not be encouraging businesses, I think, to invest resources in the social and environmental arena, which brings us to the upper right-hand space, which is what I call strategic corporate responsibility. And this is the space that excites me the most. And this is where kind of, okay, I create social value and I create environmental value. And so therefore, not only do I make a difference to society, but in doing so, I can also make a difference to the well-being of my firm. And what are the conditions that essentially kind of enable us to exist in this space is basically the topic of my investigation today. So if you think about the way in which corporate responsibility, so before I move on, so this space, the upper right-hand space, is also called the triple bottom line, and also familiarly referred to as kind of people, planet, and profit. So if you think about the way in which value gets created by corporate responsibility, there are essentially two routes, the direct route and the indirect route. And let's take a simple example to exemplify the direct and indirect routes. So imagine that you are a company that has recently instituted two-sided printing, which is something we did recently at our business school. So all the printers got changed, and the default is two-sided. So as soon as you move to something like that, immediately there's a business outcome. I mean, you use less paper, that costs less money. At the same time, paper is a precious resource. It comes from trees, and we are saving trees. So there's a societal outcome as well. However, there is also an indirect outcome, which is kind of, okay, what do my stakeholders make of the fact that I am now engaging in two-sided printing? I don't know, some of you may know, but these days, our students also choose schools based on the sustainability performance of the school and what the school is doing to be kind of, more sustainable or implement sustainability-oriented practices. So it could be that students are kind of taking notice of the fact that you have implemented a green initiative in your institution, and it could be that your board of trustees are looking at it, and et cetera, a bunch of other stakeholders. So if I can make these stakeholders react positively to my initiative, then I can add to the value that's being created by the direct route, and hence the value of the indirect route. And hence, I'm saying that if we are able to motivate these stakeholders to react positively, or if we are able to understand under what conditions these stakeholders would react positively, then we would be able to leverage the power of corporate responsibility, hence the title of the book and the talk. So most companies have done a pretty good job of the direct route, but if you look at the indirect route, there's still a lot of work to be done, and hence my fascination with that. So the direct route, essentially, as I mentioned, there's a lot of work going on in that. You may have heard about carbon footprinting and water footprinting and these kinds of exercises that companies have undertaken. And if you go through the websites of companies, I mean, you will see many examples of companies engaging in these kinds of activities. One great example is from Marks and Spencer's, who have a social initiative which is called Plan A, in which they have invested a bunch of money, but they've actually made more profits than what they invested in it. And in the Plan A, what they have done through Plan A is they have been able to reduce their total carbon emissions. They've been able to improve their store energy efficiency, improve their store refrigeration emissions, improve general merchandise delivery fleet efficiency, all these kinds of things. And a lot of this basically deals with, engineering concepts and scientific concepts that elude me. So on the spectrum of being a scientist and or the spectrum between an engineer and a psychologist, I'm more a psychologist than an engineer. And this part, so the direct route basically goes to those folks who really have a good understanding of hard sciences and engineering and so on. And we've made interesting progress, quite a good, and there's still a lot to be done, but we've made a good amount of progress. You look at companies like BASF, they have an initiative called Eco-Efficiency, whereby they analyze the performance of different kinds of materials over multiple dimensions to figure out kind of which one is the best one to use to make a particular product. So there's a lot of work going on. But my interest is really in the indirect route. Now, if you look at the indirect route, and try to understand how stakeholders react to corporate responsibility, and you do some kind of literature searches on this, particularly in the managerial world, you will find something like this. So this is a statistic that I came across, which is collected by a company called Cone Communications, good friends of mine. They're out of Boston. They do these omnibus surveys where they interview a bunch of people to ask them about their habits in the corporate responsibility arena and so on. So one of the statistics that is widely published, let's say, is that 87% of people are likely to switch from one product to another, price and quality being equal, if the other product is associated with a good cause. And you look at the statistic and you say, 87% will switch from one product to another. I mean, that's a really good, just because one product is associated with a good cause is going to prompt 87% of these households or people who are surveyed to switch from one branch to another. That's got to be a really, really good sign. So perhaps I should invest my money in corporate responsibility. But I think, if you think about the statement, or if you think about the question being asked, I think you would be remiss if you did that, because the question is basically telling you that there are two products, A and B. The prices and the quality of both these products are identical, right? And one of the products is associated with a good cause. So if you're a rational person, and if you think rationally, then you will observe that one alternative actually dominates the other alternative, the one that supports the good cause. So if you are a person that believes generally in helping society and supporting good causes and supporting companies that support good causes, if it doesn't come out of something else, here it's being said price and quality is equal, then of course you're going to say, yes, I'm going to buy the brand with a good cause. In other words, this is a question that's fraught with all kinds of problems and biases, the way it's kind of phrased. In the real world, price and quality are seldom equal or almost never equal across products. And in reality, everybody is associated with a social cause. Everybody is associated with a social cause. So, asking this question does not really give a manager asking this kind of question and publishing this kind of statistic, although it's good. I mean, it's perhaps overall some kind of a summary statistic that's useful to keep in mind. It does not really offer any diagnostics in terms of kind of, okay, what should we do, or in terms of investing in corporate responsibility. So I figured that this would be a good kind of a backdrop to, okay, so we need to do some actual research in this topic, and hence the research program. So what I've done then over the last decade or decade plus is I've engaged with multiple co-authors, Shankar Sen, Daniel Portion, who are on the book with me, Shuli Du, another researcher with whom I've worked quite closely, and many others. On a large research program, on a very large research program, which has mixed basically qualitative methods and quantitative methods. So we've done focus groups and depth interviews, and then surveys, field experiments, laboratory experiments, secondary data analysis, you name it. And this has kind of basically spanned thousands and thousands of consumers and employees. These are the two stakeholder groups that I've really studied quite closely. And I've worked with multiple companies like Procter & Gamble, General Mills, Walmart, Danone, and a bunch of others. Albeit, I have to say that the geographic focus of the work has so far been US and Europe. I'm just starting to do some work in emerging markets such as India to understand how corporate responsibility works there. But as you will observe from the later slides, our work is basically rooted in social psychology and theories of social psychology. So, the broad model of the broad implications from the model should hold good across other geographies as well. But truth be told, I have not actually studied consumers and employees in those markets. Okay, so what do we find? And obviously, this is the reason why you will need to get hold of this book if you're interested. But I'll just give you a snapshot here. What we find in terms of how stakeholders interpret corporate responsibility can be simply presented in terms of a model which I call the 3 U's model. And the 3 U's are essentially three factors that drive corporate responsibility, reactions to corporate responsibility by these two stakeholder groups, consumers and employees. And these 3 factors are understanding, usefulness, and unity. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a little bit of time to explain to you what each of these kind of mean. So understanding. And understanding is further divided into multiple components. And the first component of understanding is awareness. If you think about it, if a stakeholder does not know what a company is doing in the corporate responsibility realm, there is no way they can reward the company for being responsible. There is just no way. And we find that awareness levels of corporate responsibility activities are quite low, not just amongst consumers, but also amongst employees. So what we find across multiple studies is that awareness in the consumer realm ranges between 13 to 20%. I mean, you can say, let's say yogurt, you think about like Stonyfield Farm or Danone or Yoplait, or everybody knows what these companies are doing. No, there we find that the awareness is, kind of at most 20% if we survey kind of thousands of consumers at random using like an online questionnaire. And you can say, well, consumers, that's okay. I mean, 20%, that's not so bad. But if you look at employees, I mean, we've studied the best companies in the world, and we find that awareness amongst employees of what the company is doing in terms of corporate responsibility is about 50%. So half the employees don't really know what the company does in the corporate responsibility realm. So if the employees don't know what the company does, then there is no way that they can actually spread positive word of mouth, or that they can feel more loyal, or they can feel more jazzed about where they work. All the benefits that we know corporate responsibility brings about, none of that can be had. So job number one is to increase awareness of corporate responsibility both amongst employees as well as amongst consumers. And whilst doing so, I have a communication guideline which is kind of tell, don't sell. So because it's a slippery slope, increasing communicating corporate responsibility, which is a topic in and of itself, is a slippery slope because you don't want to come through as tooting your own horn. And so I have a very simple dictum there where we say, okay, tell, don't sell. So be factual, don't try to self-promote. So that's awareness. The second component of understanding, which to my mind is the heart of our model, I think, is the attributions, or trying to understand the attributions that people make, or the motives they ascribe for companies participating in these corporate responsibility initiatives. So one of the programs I studied was a program that P&G runs, Procter & Gamble, and this program is called the Crest Healthy Smiles program, whereby Crest, which is a large brand of toothpaste, they go into inner city households in the United States, and they basically teach children how to take better care of their teeth, and they do this through the Boys and Girls Clubs in America. And you might think that dental health is not a big issue, but actually it's the #1 issue for lost school days in the United States. 50 million school days are lost as a result of poor dental health per year. So we studied essentially the parents of these children. And these are, as I said, these are inner city communities. They were primarily Hispanic, so the focus groups and the quantitative study were all done in Spanish. But we got these translations. So some of the quotes we got, and these got borne out in other studies as well, that participants care or rather perceive both intrinsic as well as extrinsic motives on the part of companies for engaging in these initiatives. So these are some of the quotes. It's a form of marketing to get their products out, but it also helps the community. They want to help the community, but they also want to make a name for themselves and gain popularity. So participants, and these are not highly educated, they're not high income by any means, but these guys still perceive or understand that there is a dual motive on the part of the company for engaging in these initiatives. What's fascinating is that they endorse the extrinsic motive, and they say it's good because they're going to help us along with themselves. And participants in multiple programs told us that they would rather see that a company has a market motive for engaging in corporate responsibility, because only if they have a market motive are they going to put their real muscle behind the initiative rather than just treat it as a sideshow and as a stepchild and not give it that much attention. So herein is an important implication for companies, which is that as long as you have the sincerity of the community or the sincerity of the environment, whatever initiative you're working with, as long as you have business, as long as you have society and environment's best interests at heart, there is no reason to shy away from the fact that there is a business motive in what you're doing as well, because people get that and they respect that. So there is no reason to appear overly altruistic. And in fact, if you appear overly altruistic and try to hide the fact that you do have a business motive, it may even backfire. So that's the second thing about attributions, and there's a lot more on attributions in the book. And the third component of understanding is effectiveness. And what effectiveness means is that stakeholders really want to understand what difference you've made to the social or environmental cause that you've undertaken before they're willing to give you any reward for it, before they're willing to reciprocate and give you some reward. So have you saved some lives? Have you actually helped these children, whom you're teaching dental care? Or are you keeping people warm if you have some kind of an initiative? A company that I work with in Europe has a Fuel for Poverty program whereby they give fuel to poor people over the winter. So they want to know outcomes. Stakeholders want to know outcomes. Have you actually made a difference? Which brings us to two implications. One is that, creating social value is a prerequisite for creating business value in the corporate responsibility realm. The companies oftentimes don't get that. But unless you create that social value, unless you show that you created social value or environmental value, whatever it is, you won't be able to reap the business value, because the business value typically, at least as far as stakeholder reactions are concerned, we are talking strictly about stakeholder reactions in this talk. Stakeholders are not going to reward you unless they see that you've actually done something. The second thing is, when it comes to communication, you should really focus on the outcomes. What have you achieved? What difference have you made? Rather than focusing on the input. How much money have you spent on corporate responsibility? If you look at corporate responsibility communication, you will find that a lot of companies, tout how much money they're spending on a variety of corporate responsibility initiatives. Nobody cares. People care what difference you've actually made to, in support of the cause that you've undertaken. So, I mean, being outcome-oriented rather than input-oriented, that's an important implication. Okay, so let's move on. The second U is the U of usefulness. See, when we market products and services, it's very clear that we understand that products and services fulfill certain underlying needs that we have as human beings, as customers, as stakeholders. What we find is there's a remarkable parallel when it comes to corporate responsibility. The corporate responsibility initiatives also fulfill certain fundamental needs of stakeholders, be they employees or customers. To go back to the Breast Healthy Smiles example, what we found and what we have evidence of, and there are published papers as well as the book to back all this up, is that the children were brushing their teeth more and flossing their teeth more. Their parents did not have to bug them as much on an ongoing basis to brush and take care of their teeth, which we can think of as functional benefits. But there were also very important identity-related benefits, which are things like enhanced self-confidence and enhanced self-esteem. So we have focus group quotes that says that my child would not smile before, and now she's smiling and she's more confident about herself. She's making more friends, which are wonderful, wonderful kind of benefits to have as a result of participating in these programs. Now, these functional and identity-related benefits, they become even more prominent, or they come to life when you talk to employees. And employees really derive a lot of these benefits from corporate responsibility. So, for instance, we've heard from employees who said that, when I went to volunteer in Haiti, the experience just made me a better manager because I did not have this kind of responsibility in my job, but now I feel that I'm ready to take on more responsibility. So there's some functional benefit that was there, that an employee derived from engaging in a corporate responsibility initiative. And in terms of identity, I mean, people, we have quotes that says, I don't want to leave here thinking that I've been selling soap all my life. And this is from a person who's selling soap, mind you. But that person wants to give a bigger meaning, wants to have a better sense of self-esteem. And that better sense of self-esteem or that higher sense of purpose from what you've been doing on your job can come from engaging in corporate responsibility. And so that's a very powerful benefit that corporate responsibility can provide on the employee front. Similarly, we found that employees use corporate responsibility to come to the defense of the company if the company comes under criticism or under attack by external constituencies. We find that in large global companies, corporate responsibility initiatives can act as a bridge for a large global employee base. So all these kinds of identity-related benefits are also derived from corporate responsibility. And when these needs are fulfilled, then this leads to well-being, loyalty, positive word of mouth, etc. So one of the quotes is here, one of the things that keeps me here is some of the positive things that we do in the community. So the implication of this is that, take a market-based approach to corporate responsibility. So before you just implement any initiative because it's the CEO's favorite cause or some reason like that, engage in some research where you can try to understand which initiatives resonate with your stakeholder groups and why. And you will find that you come up with a much richer set, essentially, of initiatives that can give you far higher return from your investment than kind of initiatives that you draw out of thin air. You see, companies routinely spend millions and millions of dollars on researching products and services. If they spend a fraction of that money on researching corporate responsibility initiatives before deciding which ones to go with, I think you'd have kind of a much better scenario out there, more sharpness, more focus, and ultimately better returns to both society as well as the company. And that brings us to the third U, unity, and you see the tattoo on the Nike tattoo on the person's back, and unity. This is just a vivid way to exemplify what unity means. Unity basically is the sense of connection between a stakeholder and a company, so much so that you feel that you want to kind of, be a brand ambassador or you want to kind of, incorporate the company's values as part of your own values and so on. So it's a sense of connection between the company and a stakeholder. And we found that where there was a sense of unity, there was also better outcomes such as loyalty and advocacy and so on. And so I just wanted to give you one chart from a study that we did in the yogurt category and studied 3 brands, Stonyfield Farms, Danone in the middle, and then Yoplait. And you will find, I mean, I imagine a lot of you who are joining in today are from the United States and probably know Stonyfield Farm as a socially responsible brand and that does a lot for the community, similar to Ben & Jerry. And what we found through our research, and again this was 1,000+ consumers, and that Stonyfield consumers have a higher sense of unity with the brand, feel a stronger sense of connection with their brand relative to the peers from Danone and Yoplait. And analogously, Stonyfield consumers also have higher brand loyalty and higher advocacy. Basically means propensity to spread positive word of mouth. And these differences are statistically significant. So unity is a good thing. The third U is a good thing to try and achieve. And unity basically unity only kicks in when you have understanding and usefulness. So they are not, 3 of these are not at the same level. So first you try to get understanding and usefulness, and then as a result of these 2, unity kicks in, and then you get the business outcomes. So what does this all mean if we try to put this together? So I'll show you a couple of tests of the framework that we did, one in the customer realm and one in the employee realm. And what we found is that so this is a study from the same yogurt category that I just showed the previous chart to you from. And we looked at these 1,000+ consumers that we had, and we had measures of understanding, and we had measures of usefulness, measures of unity, and we had a bunch of measures for outcomes, such as purchase intent, intention to pay price premium, resilience to negative information, all these kinds of things. And what we did was what's called a structural equation model, and a structural equation model with controls. So what we're finding here is higher levels of understanding and higher levels of usefulness lead to higher levels of unity. I mean, that's a very simple thing. So the asterisk against these numbers essentially mean that the coefficient is statistically significant, and all we can say is that, you know, higher levels of understanding, higher levels of usefulness lead to higher levels of unity. And when we have higher levels of unity, we have higher intent to purchase the brand, we have a higher intent to pay a price premium for the brand, and we are more resilient to negative information about the brand. Now, resilience to negative information is one of the big reasons that companies invest in corporate responsibility, because they're trying to build a reservoir of goodwill for the company. Now, you might be looking at the right-hand side and saying, okay, but things like purchase intent, price premium, they may also be driven by you know, other factors such as the perceived quality of the brand or the value for money or the price, etc. And that's a point that's well taken. So what we did in this model was we accounted for those factors and we controlled for them. So we can say that all else being constant, corporate responsibility or understanding, usefulness, and unity, these factors related to corporate responsibility incrementally contributes to purchase intention and intention to pay price premium, etc. So this business value that we are showing in this chart is over and above that accrues to the brand from essentially its business variables or marketing variables, if you will. The next chart is the same framework. Now this time we tested it amongst employees, and this was done in amongst frontline retail employees, so people who work at Walmart and Target and Kmart and companies such as this. We had, I believe, 5,000 plus employees who participated in this survey. And again, what we are showing is that higher levels of understanding and higher levels of usefulness lead to higher levels of unity. And when we have higher levels of unity, you know, that has significant business outcomes, such as a lower intent to leave. So the negative sign in front of the intent to leave basically means when folks have higher identification with the brand or higher levels of unity with the brand, they're less likely to leave the company. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but, you know, companies like Walmart and Target, they spend billions of dollars each year in customer acquisition because people leave after a short period of time. So if you're able to make them stick, you know, for longer with the company, there's huge monetary benefits to that kind of stuff. Work effort, so they work harder on behalf of the company, and we have many quotes in the book to exemplify kind of how, you know, they would not leave something laying around if they saw something was wrong. They would get it fixed right away. And they're also more loyal to the company's brands. I mean, and this was relevant here because we were doing this in a retail setting. Again, in this study of the employees, what we did was we held constant the things like satisfaction with your salary, satisfaction with your supervisor, your immediate work environment, etc. So we can say that all else equal, controlling for the job product, controlling for the traditional features of the job product, corporate responsibility can incrementally contribute to essentially, you know, business value. So in all, I mean, we can now see that when we can invoke these three levers of understanding, usefulness, and unity, we are not only able to make a difference to society and or the environment, but we are also able to make a difference to our own bottom line or to our own financial performance, going back to the upper right-hand quadrant, you know, that we started off with. Now, one more study, and then I stop. So this study where we try to relate corporate responsibility to the market value of the firm. And this is just done purely using secondary data from Fortune's Most Admired Companies. Fortune, basically, they rate companies on corporate responsibility as well as on product quality and innovativeness. And then we can use other databases such as CRISP to get the market value of a firm. And I just wanted to show you one chart from this paper that's published in the Journal of Marketing in terms of how corporate responsibility reacts with other elements of business strategy. So if we basically, if you look at the left panel, what you see is that if a low-quality product does better and better on corporate responsibility, as corporate responsibility improves, there's really no impact on market value. But if a high-quality product does better and better on corporate responsibility, then of course the market value of that product or of that firm is impacted positively. And the same story is true of innovation or innovativeness. And what this means is that the market is not stupid. The market knows that the primary purpose of a firm is to develop good quality products and services. And only then will the market reward a company for being socially responsible. And if you think back to yourself at an individual level, like you will understand the intuition behind this. So let's say if you're flying an airline, Lufthansa or Delta or what have you, and if your flights are not taking off on time, if you're constantly delayed, or if you call somebody and there's no operator on the other side, you're not going to sit back at that point in time and say, Serenity now, they're good, they're socially responsible, so I should not get angry at them. Of course you're going to get angry at them. I mean, the fundamental job is to keep to the time and to respond to and to give you good customer service. So at some gut level, I mean, this makes sense. And the message from this is that, there could be a time, I mean, you can invest, of course you should invest, everybody has a place, needs to start with corporate responsibility at some place, but don't expect, if you don't have your house in order, if your product quality is not perceived to be good, or if your innovativeness, if your innovation is not perceived to be good, don't expect a lot of reward, basically, for what you're doing in the corporate responsibility arena, because your stakeholders will hold you accountable for your products and your innovativeness first. So this kind of puts the whole picture in perspective, that it's not that anybody who invests in corporate responsibility can make money off of that, but certain other conditions have to be fulfilled. Similar to the 3 U's kinds of conditions being fulfilled at the micro level. So if you put all this together, I mean, what's the overall insight? So does it pay to be good? So imagine if I have to answer Mr. Ben Cohen. Okay, 15 years have gone by. You've studied this problem for a long time. So does it pay to be good? It really is. It comes down to 2 words, and those 2 words are that it depends. I mean, it depends on factors of your business strategy, such as product quality and innovation, but it also depends on whether your stakeholders know what you're doing in the corporate responsibility realm. Do they find it to be useful? What do they attribute your motives to be? Do they feel a sense of connection or unity with your company? And only when all of this comes together do they reward you. But when all of these comes together, and obviously they do, because we are seeing evidence, positive evidence of in terms of the coefficients and stuff that I showed you. When they do, there is basically money to be reaped. So not only are you making a difference to society and environment through your corporate responsibility initiatives, but you are also able to make a difference to your own business performance. And hence it could be, in today's age where there's little to differentiate companies, this could be a very interesting lever to kind of use strategically and extract value from your stakeholders. Now, as I was doing this study, I just want to leave you with this one thought, is that I found that the corporate responsibility folks or the sustainability folks are really lonely in companies. I mean, they're not integrated. They're outshouted by their peers from other departments. They don't really know how to use sustainability and corporate responsibility to their competitive advantage, etc. So what I'm doing now is I've undertaken, now that my book is published, I've undertaken it upon myself to start this center or roundtable where you see the companies that have joined this forum. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to mainstream, or trying to figure out how best to kind of mainstream corporate responsibility practices and sustainability practices within companies, so that it is embedded as part of the strategy and it's not used as a bolt-on. So what I do here is I pair up sustainability officers with their colleagues from other departments, from procurement, HR, marketing, etc., to develop a shared understanding to mainstream sustainability. So I create these thematic meetings whereby, so okay, how do we integrate sustainability into HR? So the sustainability managers come from 20 companies, and they bring their colleagues from HR, each of them. So we have 20 sustainability managers and 20 HR managers, and we spend a day and a half thinking about how to integrate sustainability practices into the HR function so that every employee in every company is essentially a sustainability manager, and it's not thought of as somebody else's job in a faraway department. And similarly, marketing. So how do we extract, how do we get customers to reward us for being sustainable? So we just finished a meeting on that. The next meeting is on innovation. So if there are practitioners out there who may be interested in this kind of forum, please feel free to get in touch with me, and I'm happy to chat more. And then last but not least, if you like what you heard, or if you like this kind of research and you feel that this might be of some relevance to you, please support the research and buy the book. It's available everywhere, wherever books are sold, on Amazon and places like that. And then with that, I shall end my part. And my email address is there in case you wish to engage. I welcome that. And I shall stop now, and we can have a discussion.
Well, thank you very much for those insights. I think it's particularly interesting and valuable that you started this roundtable because, the idea that sustainability people are kind of corralled as people that have that long-term perspective. They've sort of got a boundary drawn around them in many organizations, is quite interesting. We do have several good questions that have come from our audience, so let me pose one of those to you at this point. The first question will be, do you have any suggestions for how to encourage a more traditionally minded company to incorporate strategic corporate relations into their business plans?
Yeah, I mean, a simple suggestion would be to expose them to this kind of, the talk I just made, to help them see the linkages, to help them see that it's not mere engagement, that mere engagement just does not work, and that the only way that you will derive some kind of reward from it, if you're interested in business rewards. Now, there are a set of companies, I don't know what traditional really means in this case. There are a set of companies who will say, we don't really care whether we get any business reward out of this or not. We're just doing it for the normative case. We want to do some good. In that case, I don't know. It probably strategy, whether it's strategic or not, it's probably less important. So I take it this is a company that does want to derive some reward. And then if it's a traditional company that wants to derive some reward, then the best way to do it is to show this kind of evidence. I've personally spoken at lots of senior management forums, and basically showing them the evidence from the trenches that look, this is what your this is what your stakeholders think and say, and unless you follow a certain path, a strategic path, there is no there's not going to be any reward for your investment at the end of the day. So I'm an empiricist, so my tack at least would always be to show them the data and to kind of thereby make a more convincing case rather than just engaging in more rhetoric.
Okay, thanks. A second question, the research showed that customers will choose a brand that demonstrates corporate responsibility over one that does not, all other factors being equal. How does this relate to the premium derived from the 3 U's framework?
Right. So the case where nobody is doing, or the research, the first research, or where one brand is doing something and another brand is not, that's not my research. That's the one I showed. That was something that was a study that was done by Cone Communications. And I made the point there that there was, basically that was an artificial case. This is not a case that's founded in reality, because pretty much everybody is doing something in the corporate responsibility realm and charging different prices. So the 3 U's, on the contrary, is in fact founded in reality. So in the 3U's case, on the premium that's being derived from the 3U's, that's where different brands are engaging in corporate responsibility, and they are charging different prices, and they have different perceived qualities, et cetera, et cetera. It's just the reality of the marketplace. Just visualize the yogurt marketplace, if you will. All we are showing there is that, once you hold constant, or control for the prices and the quality perceptions, etc., those consumers who have a better understanding of what the company is doing in the corporate responsibility realm, and those consumers who find it more useful, those initiatives to be personally useful to them, and those consumers who therefore feel this stronger sense of connection, they are the ones who are going to reward the company. They are the ones who are more likely to pay the price premium. They're the ones who are more likely to pay, to be more resilient to the negative information, and to buy the brand to a higher extent, et cetera, et cetera. So the two are different examples. They're non-comparable examples. I mean, in the first example, it's that, okay, here are two brands, price and quality are equal. One brand is doing something, the other brand is not. And the main difference here, and the main thing is, I am being asked this question. So that may have been at the heart of this question. The first situation where the two brands have the price and quality equal, and one brand is engaging in the social cause, that's a survey. So that's a survey that's being done on the phone, and I'm calling people, I'm saying, hey, here are two brands A and B that have their prices, the same price and the same quality. One brand is associated with a good cause. Which brand are you going to buy? That's the first situation. The second situation, people are just responding. They're just responding to questions about these various yogurt brands. It's all in a very subtle way. They're not being asked, kind of, okay, this is the situation. Which one are you going to choose? So they're just basically, giving us their purchase intention, their perceptions of quality of both brands, their perceptions of prices and value for money of both brands, their perceptions of their awareness and the perceptions of corporate responsibility of all these three brands, and then we're statistically modeling them to figure out kind of the premium that's being extracted by the use. So very different circumstance. One is, I would say, an artificial circumstance that's kind of not founded in reality. The 3U's is totally kind of regular people who are answering regular questions about multiple brands in the marketplace, and then the statistics does the statistical modeling kind of does the rest of the job to figure out the premium that they're willing to pay.
Okay, that's very helpful. Here's a practical, very practically oriented question. Do you have any suggestions about how a company can better leverage their employees as brand ambassadors from a CR perspective?
Yes. I think what companies basically need to do is to create some excitement around CR. I mean, the way you can use them as brand ambassadors is to create some excitement around. So in most companies, again, CR is just relegated to a necessary evil or something that we need to do in today's day and age. But the more innovative companies are essentially, creating things like idea contests. So you engage your employees to say, okay, we would like to have ideas from all of you in terms of what it is that we can do as an organization to be more sustainable. And Siemens, for example, one of the companies that I work with and who's part of my roundtable, they had an idea contest of this kind. They had 85,000 employees that participated in that contest. On their own time, they collaborated with their colleagues to come up with their own ideas, and they submitted this. And then what happens is that employees vote on which ideas kind of bubble to the top, and then the company has a commitment that they're going to act on the most important ideas, and they're going to take that up and incubate them and so on. So when you do something like that, I mean, immediately that creates a certain level of excitement, and that level of excitement basically permeates, into then the social arena and into the social media and everything else that employees are are doing with their own friends and relatives and peers and so on, and that creates this kind of viral effect or this buzz effect. So to spark brand ambassadorship, my advice would be to think of something. It doesn't have to be an idea contest. It could be, okay, come up with an ad campaign, or it could be whatever. Okay, let's go and do something participative. Let's go together and do something, all of us, as an organization. So it's going to be our day together. Whatever it is, as long as as soon as you create a special place in the employee's heart and mind, the employee is going to talk about it, because that's what we do as human beings. We typically talk about distinctive events that happen in our lives to others that we know and care about.
Thank you. So I noticed that the companies mentioned in your research are mostly food or retail. What do we know, or what have you learned about differences in strategic CR approach across industries?
Yeah, that's a very good question. In essence, not much. The differences are not much, because if you think about employees in the employee realm, every employee has essentially the same role and responsibility, whatever it is that they do, and they have the same sense of self-esteem, reputation, or rewarding of negative reputation, etc. So we find across a variety of industries, B2B, B2C, what have you, that there is really no difference kind of in the employee arena, and everything is more or less the same. And by the way, the employee arena that's the strongest link to the outcome or to the return. So if you think about companies, if you can really effectively utilize your employee base to be brand ambassadors of your CR, and then you've done, you already leveraged it quite a bit. In the consumer realm also, so it's in the B2, it's a little bit different in the B2B compared to the B2C, but the same fundamental tenets. So the measures might be different. The measures that we use to kind of glean what's happening kind of in the in terms of your components of understanding or usefulness, the specific measures might be different, but they're equally concerned, because today companies, B2B companies, are also being asked by their clients and by their suppliers okay, are you responsible, and what is it that you're doing to be responsible? So again, I use the Siemens, so I use Siemens one more time. So Siemens, for instance, is now running a sales training program for their employees, for their sales force rather, where they teach their sales force how to talk to customers about their sustainability initiatives and their corporate responsibility initiatives. So they're trying to basically bring that up as a differentiator in the conversation, so that they kind of, Siemens stand out as a provider of goods and services. So there again, I mean, the customer who's listening to the Siemens salesperson talk, also has the same issues about kind of awareness, attributions, effectiveness that Siemens is making. And so at the conceptual level, the differences are actually not as stark or as large as we would think beforehand to be. The difference really lies in specific operational measures that we would use. If I had to do a study for a large B2B company, the measures would probably be different from what I would use kind of in the retail industry. But the theory still holds good.
Okay, well, thank you. At this time, I would like to bring a close to the questions. So thank you to Professor Bhattacharya for taking the time to be with us today to share this really interesting and important information and insights from his work. If you enjoyed today's webinar, I hope you will also be able to join us for the next installment of the Leadership Perspectives webinar series. Please visit www.ila-net.org for more details. Have a great day.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.